I still remember the way the door closed that night. Not slammed, just closed, quiet, like he didn't want to wake the kids, like he wanted to disappear without making a sound. Marcus stood in the hallway for a moment holding that old brown duffel bag. He didn't look at me when he spoke. His voice was cold, flat, like I was a stranger. "You were a mistake I can't carry anymore." That was all he said. No apology, no explanation, no goodbye to our children. And just like that, he was gone. I stood in that hallway, still in my house slippers, clutching the side of the kitchen counter just to stay on my feet. The silence after he left wasn't peaceful. It was loud, the kind of silence that wraps around your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Upstairs, my babies were asleep. James had fallen asleep on top of his covers again, holding that little red truck like it was a shield. Amira, my sweet girl, was curled up under her blanket, whispering in her sleep. They had no idea their world had just cracked open. And me? I whispered the question I had no answer for. How do I tell them their father is gone? The morning after he left, the house felt colder. Not from the weather, the heater still worked, but from something else, something missing. I stood in the kitchen staring at the empty chair across the table. Marcus's coffee mug was still in the sink. His jacket still hung by the door. But he was gone, and we all knew it. I poured oatmeal into 3 bowls, mine, James's, and Amira's. It used to be 4. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat felt tight like it was holding back a dam. James came in first, rubbing his eyes, dragging his little dinosaur slippers across the floor. "Where's Daddy?" he asked. Just like that. No hesitation, no warning. I forced a smile I didn't feel. He had to leave for a while, baby. But he didn't say bye. I knelt beside him, brushing the curls from his forehead. I know. Amira entered next, quiet as usual. She glanced at the table, then at me. She didn't ask anything. She just sat down and picked at her oatmeal. After a few minutes, she spoke, barely above a whisper. "He's never coming back, is he?" I looked at her, my 10-year-old daughter who had just skipped the whole process of hope and gone straight to the truth. And all I could do was reach across the table and hold her hand. "We're going to be okay," I said. I don't know if I believed it in that moment, but I said it anyway. Because sometimes, when you're the only one left, you don't have the luxury of falling apart. You have to be the table, the roof, the ground beneath their feet. Even when you're breaking inside, the bills started to stack up like they had somewhere to be. Electric, water, mortgage, all printed in bold letters, demanding things I didn't have. I sat at the kitchen table late into the night, the same one where we used to laugh over Sunday pancakes. Now it was covered in envelopes, red letters, final notices, numbers that didn't care about my tears. I stared at the phone for hours before I finally picked it up. My hand shook as I dialed Marcus's number, the one I told myself I'd never call again. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I knew he wouldn't call back. The next morning there was a knock at the door. A man in a windbreaker and clipboard stood on my porch, barely making eye contact. "Ma'am, you're behind on the mortgage. If we don't receive payment within 30 days, the property enters pre-foreclosure." I nodded like I understood. But I didn't. Not really. I couldn't afford to panic. Not with 2 kids upstairs, still in their pajamas, asking if we were going to church this Sunday. That night, after they went to bed, I opened a notebook and wrote out every dollar I had left. It wasn't enough for rent, food, and the car. Something had to give. I stared at the numbers until the lines blurred, and then I heard Amira's voice from the hallway. "Mama, are we going to have to move?" I looked up, startled. She was standing there in her nightgown, holding her little brother's stuffed bear. I opened my arms. She walked into them. I don't know yet, I whispered. But I promise wherever we are, I'll be with you. Always. She didn't say anything, just held on tighter. And right then I made a silent vow. No matter what I had to do, scrub floors, bag groceries, clean strangers' houses, my kids wouldn't go without a roof. Not on my watch. I hadn't spoken to Loretta since the baby shower for James. She didn't like me then, and she sure didn't like me now. But I was out of options. No job, no money, foreclosure breathing down my neck, and 2 little mouths to feed. She lived just across town, in that white house with the iron fence and rose bushes she trimmed like they were royalty. I stood at her front door, palms sweating, heart thudding like a drum. She opened the door in her usual Sunday clothes, pressed blouse, gold earrings, and that same cold stare she always gave me. Evelyn. No hug, no smile, just my name, like it tasted bad in her mouth. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important, I said. So don't waste time, she replied, stepping aside. I walked in and sat on the edge of the couch. Everything in her house looked expensive but untouched, like a showroom, not a home. Marcus left us. It's been 3 weeks. The mortgage is behind. I just need a little help to get through this month. She didn't blink, didn't move. You think I'm surprised? That caught me off guard. Excuse me. You were never right for him, she said. You took a boy in his prime and wrapped him in diapers and responsibilities. Now you want me to pay for your mistake? I stood up. My voice was shaking, but I kept it steady. They're his children too. But they live with you, she said, sharp as glass. So you deal with it. There it was. No warmth, no help, just judgment in every syllable. You stole his youth, she said finally. This is your punishment. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, some part of me was still too raw, still too ashamed to fight back. I turned toward the door. Thank you for your time, Loretta. I pray for those children, she muttered behind me. But I didn't look back. Outside, I stood on her perfect front steps and took a deep breath, and I promised myself one more time that I would never ask that woman for anything again. I used to walk through that school parking lot with pride. Hair done, heels on, kids smiling and holding my hands. But that was before. Now I kept my head down, pulled my coat tight, prayed no one would ask where Marcus was. Amira gripped my hand as we walked toward the building. James was already skipping ahead, oblivious, backpack bouncing. A group of mothers stood near the entrance, huddled like they always were, fresh coffee in hand, makeup perfect before 9 a.m. They saw me coming and the air shifted. No one said hello, just side eyes and half smiles. And then as I passed, I heard it, not loud, but loud enough. Isn't she like in her 60s and starting over with toddlers? I heard he ran off. Can you blame him? I kept walking, one step, then another. Amira didn't say a word until we got to her classroom. Mama, she said softly, why do they talk like that? I crouched down, fixed her collar, and kissed her forehead. Some people don't know how to mind their own business. They think you're too old, she said, barely looking at me. Her voice was flat, not angry, just tired, the way a child gets when they've seen too much. I swallowed hard. Maybe I am older than the other moms, but I'm still your mom, and I'm not going anywhere. She nodded, but her eyes didn't light up like they used to. On the walk back to the car, the weight of their words followed me like a shadow. I could hear them still, those whispers behind my back, trying to make me feel small, trying to remind me I didn't belong. But they didn't know what I had survived. They didn't know what I was willing to do for my children. Let them whisper. I had work to do. The job paid just above minimum wage. No benefits, no mercy. But it was work, and I needed it. I woke up before the sun, made sandwiches for the kids, left notes in their lunchboxes, checked on them while they slept. James curled up with his truck, Amira breathing soft and steady. Then I slipped out the door with my cleaning supplies in a second-hand tote bag and boots that pinched my toes. The office building smelled like bleach and stale coffee. My shift started at 5 a.m., scrubbing floors that people would walk across without ever noticing. That was the thing about cleaning. If you did it right, no one ever saw you. Sometimes I passed the night crew on their way out. Young people in scrubs or delivery uniforms, earbuds in, faces blank. No one ever asked my name. I cleaned bathrooms, wiped down desks, emptied trash cans filled with fast food wrappers and crumpled papers. And one morning, around 6:30, I heard someone laugh behind me. "Well, look who it is. Evelyn Hart, the PTA queen. Cleaning toilets now?" I turned slowly. It was Renee. We'd served on the same fundraiser committee 2 years ago, back when I wore dresses and heels to school events and smiled like nothing could touch me. Now I stood in front of her in rubber gloves, holding a mop bucket. "Didn't think I'd see you here," she said, still smirking. "Guess things really did fall apart, huh?" I didn't answer, just kept cleaning. Because some battles don't deserve a response, because pride doesn't pay the bills, and because my children would eat tonight because of this job, not because of what she thought of me. She laughed again and walked away, heels clicking on the tile. When my shift ended, I rode the bus home with sore hands and the smell of disinfectant clinging to my coat. But when I walked through the door, Amira ran to me with her spelling test. James held up a drawing of a house, me, him, and his sister. No Marcus, just us. And suddenly, the floor I scrubbed that morning didn't matter. The stares, the comments, the humiliation, none of it mattered. Because this was what I worked for. And they were still mine. It had been weeks since someone invited me anywhere. So when Nora called and said, "Come over, I made stew," I almost cried. I wrapped James and Amira in coats and walked the 6 blocks to her house just after sunset. Nora Delgado was the kind of woman who didn't need to ask too many questions to understand your silence. We met years ago at church, and though we weren't close then, she had always looked at me with kindness, not pity. Her house smelled like garlic, onions, and warmth. There was music playing softly from a speaker in the corner. Old soul, the kind that made the room feel full. "You look tired," she said, opening her arms. "Come sit." The kids settled in on the couch with a cartoon and some apple slices while I sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug. I didn't know how to start. Didn't want to dump all my struggle onto her clean countertops, but she didn't need me to. "He's not coming back, is he?" I shook my head. "Good," she said. "Then let's talk about what you're going to do next." That was Nora. No sugarcoating, no pretending. Just love, wrapped in truth. We talked about work, about bills, about how tired my body felt, and how I didn't know how long I could keep cleaning offices and staying strong for the kids. She nodded like she understood every word before I even said it. "You ever think about numbers?" she asked. "You mean like math?" She chuckled. "Bookkeeping. Small businesses need people who can manage accounts, file receipts, stay organized. You're already doing that just to survive." I looked at her surprised. "I haven't studied in decades." "So what? There's a class at the community center, evening program. Starts next month." I hesitated. "School? At my age? With everything going on?" She reached over and took my hand. "You've spent your whole life doing for others, Evelyn. This time, do something that builds you." For the first time in weeks, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something waiting beyond survival. I didn't say yes that night, but I took the pamphlet home. I read it 3 times after the kids fell asleep. And before I turned out the light, I whispered to myself, Maybe I can start over. Christmas used to be his favorite holiday. Marcus would go all out. Lights on the porch, jazz records spinning, gifts stacked under the tree like we were rich. This year the porch was dark. I bought a tiny tree from the discount lot 2 days before Christmas. $15, lean, lopsided. But the kids didn't complain. They decorated it with paper ornaments and buttons we found in an old sewing kit. I made dinner from what I had: a small chicken, rice, and canned green beans. No pie, no ham, no music, just quiet. But children have a way of pulling joy from scraps. James ran around in a Santa hat someone gave him at school. Amira wrapped her gifts in newspaper, folding the corners with careful pride. We sat on the floor that night, opening the few things I could manage: a used book for Amira, a second-hand toy truck for James. They smiled anyway. "Did you see how the wheels still work?" James asked, turning the truck upside down. "I love the cover on this one," Amira said, hugging her book like it was gold. I watched them, hearts swelling and breaking at the same time. Then James looked up. "Will Daddy come next Christmas?" The room froze. Amira didn't look at me. She just stared at the tree. I took a breath. Slow. Careful. "I don't think so, baby." James nodded, but his eyes dimmed just a little. Later that night, after they went to bed, I sat by the window with a blanket around my shoulders. Outside, the neighbors' lights blinked red and green. Somewhere families were laughing, toasting, celebrating, and I sat alone in the stillness. I had survived birthdays, school nights, overdue bills, but something about Christmas made the absence louder. Still, I lit one candle, just one, and I whispered a prayer. Not for him, but for strength, to keep going, to give my children the kind of love that stays, even when everything else disappears. The first time I walked into that community center classroom, I almost turned around and left. Most of the people there were half my age. Sharp clothes, fast fingers, new phones lighting up with notifications I couldn't understand. And then there was me, notebook in hand, second-hand sweater, nervous smile. But I stayed, because Nora had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and because I had promised those children something better. The first few weeks were hard. I hadn't studied anything since the Reagan administration. I didn't know what cloud-based software meant. I barely knew how to use a mouse properly. But I showed up every night after work, sat in the front row, took notes like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. Months passed, and slowly, things started to change. I got my first freelance gig helping a hair salon organize receipts, then a bakery, then a small landscaping company that couldn't make sense of its invoices. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I came home late, exhausted but proud. The money didn't pour in, but it trickled, steady and clean, enough to move us into a 2-bedroom apartment near a better school. The day we moved in, Amira stood in the middle of her room, quiet. Then she smiled, a full smile, the kind I hadn't seen in months. "Can we put up posters?" she asked. "Anything you want," I said. James ran from room to room, yelling, "We have 2 sinks! Mama, 2!" That night, after they fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop, the one Nora gave me as a gift, just to get started. My inbox had a new message. Subject: Hart numbers, bookkeeping inquiry. I smiled at the name. Hart, not his name, mine, ours, the name we carried forward. But just as I was about to respond, there was a knock at the door. I looked at the clock. Too late for deliveries, too early for emergencies. I opened it, and there he was. Marcus, thinner, paler, hair messy, eyes hollow. He didn't speak right away, just looked at me, like he was trying to decide if I was real. And I stood there in silence, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something colder. Recognition. After all this time, he had returned. But he wasn't coming back to the woman he left. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Marcus stood in the doorway like a ghost that forgot it had died. His clothes were wrinkled, his hands trembled. He looked like someone who'd been sleeping in borrowed places, asking for favors he never planned to return. I didn't invite him in. "What do you want?" I asked. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come right away. I didn't know where else to go. I folded my arms. "You always knew where we lived. You just didn't care." He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. I was stupid. I know that now. Stupid would have been forgetting an anniversary. You walked out on your children. He winced. "I didn't think it'd be this hard," he muttered. "I thought I'd find something better, a fresh start, but everything fell apart." "Mine did too," I said. "Difference is, I didn't run." He sat down on the porch step without asking. Shoulders slumped, face sunken. The man who used to criticize the way I folded laundry now couldn't hold eye contact for more than a second. "I got sick," he said finally. "Can't work. I'm behind on everything. I thought maybe you could help me get back on my feet." I stared at him, searching for something. Shame, guilt, growth. But all I saw was need, not remorse, not love, just need. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me and sat beside him, but not close. "You left me with 2 kids, no money, no warning. You gave up your seat at this table the moment you walked out that door." He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "No, you don't get to speak now. I carried those babies through fevers, through tears, through nights they cried for you, and I had no answers." "I know I hurt you," he whispered. "You didn't just hurt me. You vanished, and we lived through it." He looked up at me then, really looked. But I wasn't the woman he remembered. I had lines around my mouth from late nights, calluses on my hands from work. But my back was straight, my eyes clear, my voice steady. "I survived without you, and so did they." He nodded slowly. His shoulders caved in a little more. "So, that's it? That's peace," I said. "That's me choosing my children, my dignity, my life." I stood and opened the door behind me. "Goodbye, Marcus." I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly, the same way he did the night he left. But this time, the silence didn't hurt. This time, it felt like closure. The auditorium was packed. Parents fanning themselves with programs, kids squirming in folding chairs, phones raised to catch the moment. I stood in the back, hands folded, eyes locked on the stage. Amira stood in the 3rd row, cap on, tassels swaying gently. 12 years old and already carrying herself like a young woman. She caught my eye and gave a quick, almost shy smile. James sat beside me, legs swinging under the chair, fists full of gold star stickers he'd been handing out to strangers. The principal stepped up to the mic and began reading names. Applause, flashbulbs, sniffling moms. When they called Evelyn Hart, I held my breath. She walked across the stage like she belonged there, and maybe for the first time. I let myself feel it. Pride, pure and unfiltered. Not pride because we survived, but because we built something stronger than survival. When the ceremony ended, the crowd spilled outside. Balloons floating, cameras flashing, kids hugging, teachers laughing. I held my daughter, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "You did it, baby." "We did it," she said. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. Marcus, standing by a tree, half in shadow, thin, still sick maybe, watching us from a distance. He didn't wave, didn't step forward, just watched. Amira saw him too. She looked up at me. "Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head. "You owe him nothing. He's already seen the truth." We turned away. At home that night, Nora brought over a bottle of sparkling cider, and we set out paper plates and a homemade cake. Nothing fancy, everything perfect. We raised our cups around the kitchen table, me, Amira, James, and Nora. I looked at their faces, all of them glowing with light I didn't think I'd ever see again. To us, I said, because we were always enough. They clinked their cups, laughing, full of joy that had nothing to do with who left and everything to do with who stayed. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Not because I was alone, but because I wasn't lost anymore. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end quietly, with peace, with breath, with truth. I didn't get revenge. I didn't need to. My power wasn't in proving him wrong. It was in raising my children right, in holding my head high when no one was watching, in starting over when the world said I was too old, too tired, too broken. They were wrong. I wasn't broken. I was being rebuilt, slower, stronger, and on my own terms. My kids grew up knowing love didn't leave, even when people did. They saw struggle, yes, but also persistence. They saw what it means to stay, to fight, to rise. And now? Now I sleep without waiting for footsteps that won't return. I laugh without bitterness. I walk into rooms without shrinking, because I reclaimed my life, piece by piece, day by day, and no one can take that from me. If you've ever had to start over, if you've ever been left behind, counted out, or told you weren't enough, I see you, and I hope you know, you still have time. You still have strength. You are not finished yet. Share your story below. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone.